Hello. I guess it's time to go. Okay, I have been working inside of Typesafe for about 6 months now. Hasn't actually always been clear what I've been up to, so this is a bit of a chance for me to show what I've been working on. And also, nobody told you when you came in here, but there are armed guards at the exits. You're all volunteered now, you can't leave. Good, right, now we've got past that. What I've been up to is trying to, well, let me explain about my first couple of weeks working with Typesafe. I arrived, and the week after I arrived, there was a bit of a meltdown on Travis, or to do with Travis CI and Maven Central, where some jars, particularly the Scala compiler 210.2, stopped getting delivered, and it broke everybody's Travis builds. That was a bit of an emergency and needed some careful handling and some rapid action. Following that, Type Level announced that they were going to be forking Java. This was a heck of a first few weeks on the job. And what became clear from all of that is that there was some, he says subtly, some dissatisfaction with the community contributor story in Scala at the time. There was a feeling that there wasn't enough messaging, a feeling that contributions weren't really all that sought, all that valued. And so it became pretty apparent to me that probably the most valuable thing that I can do is try and get this whipped into some kind of shape. So, and to make this a bit more fun, because, you know, this could be a fairly dry topic, I've picked up some images from propaganda campaigns of the past. This is very much a recruiting mission for me. So there's a lot of propaganda material in here that I think you'll enjoy. Some of it is actually, I suspect some of you will actually want to buy, and there are links at the bottom where you can go and get this stuff. I think you'll know the ones when you see them. All right, so the to-do for the community. When you come in, and the way I went about this was I became a completely fresh, I kind of partitioned off a bit of my mind, and I became a completely fresh newcomer to the Scala contributor space for the purposes of this. I assumed nothing, and I went through and contributed some changes, kind of muddling into things as I would imagine people would the first time. And it surprised me just how long it took to pull all the pieces together that I needed for each of these kind of contribution efforts. So it quickly became apparent that there was definitely more than one area to contribute to. That much was obvious. There were already kind of 3 things that you could do according to the site, and that was documentation. There was options for contributing documentation. There was bug fixing. And then we skipped, I don't know, an enormous gulf. And then the last thing was submitting a SIP, which is actually changing Scala itself. So there was this quite big gap between sort of documentation, bug fixes, and then suddenly, oh, let's do something really deep and meaningful with the language. So what I came up with, first of all, was kind of a set of categories. And the idea behind this is, if you want to contribute, and I hope you all do, you're all here for a start, that's a great start. If you want to contribute, there is definitely something that you can do to help us. No matter what your level, whether you're just starting out with Scala, to whether you code type systems so that you can boil your egg in the morning. Okay? So there's documentation. This was already up there, it just needed some gap closing. There's bug fixes. These, again, had great resources. There was just a little bit of work to be done to sort of summarize and index that effort. Tools and IDEs were completely absent. And this is a huge part of our ecosystem. Now, obviously, there's a lot of tools. What we're talking about primarily here is the tools that pretty much all of us use without even thinking about them. Those would include things like most people use SBT, or the incremental compiler, at least, that's used by SBT and Maven and the other Gradle, all the other build tools. There's the Eclipse IDE that's used by a lot of people. There's things like dbuild and partest. We'll get to all of them anyway, but A lot of people use Scala-reform, and I'm going to make a special pitch for Scala-reform later. There's also core libraries, and I think this is the most sorely neglected part of Scala that there is right now. The core libraries haven't really changed since 2.8. There's been a few minor tweaks here and there, and some people have donated some bug fixes, but we haven't had anything really new happen. And 2.8 was quite a long time ago. What was it, 3 years now? I can't actually remember. When? 2.8, about 3 years ago? 2.8 of Scala. 4.5 years ago. Okay, so time's moving a bit quicker for me as I'm getting more grey hairs apparently. And then, of course, there are compiler features. So these 5 broad divisions are sort of also to some degree, the gradient of experience. So if you want to contribute, you can start with kind of the documentation side of things, get involved with bug fixes, help out with tools and IDEs. And there's also, that's the other thing about this, is not everybody wants to work on libraries. Some people want to work on tools. Not everybody wants to work on tools. Some want to work on the compiler. You can choose your level of involvement here. Okay, I started with documentation, and why did I do that? Well, first thing, it was the most complete, and that's largely thanks to Heather Miller's efforts. She's been working on the documentation tirelessly with not a lot of thanks for quite a long time. They needed a bit of an update, and in particular there were just gaps in places. Particularly, I went and contributed kind of documentation to all the different parts of the Scala sphere, I guess you'd call it, and just made a note of wherever there were any gaps and filled them in. But the main reason I did this is that nobody here has any excuse now if you see something else wrong on the site in the work I've done or anybody else has done, not to help and contribute a fix, because it's documented how to do that. So if you see something wrong, there's actually a link on the pages now that says, do you see something wrong on this page? Help us by giving us a fix. Okay, what's changed? First of all, there was a reorg of the documentation stuff. Even these 5 broad, where are we? The 5 broad things that we've got. Within documentation, there's like 4 or 5 different things that you can actually donate or contribute there, and they're significantly different from one another. So there was a certain amount of reorg and gap closing, and basically I just added anything that I couldn't follow or updated anything I couldn't follow the first time through. Anything I could follow, I just left it there for now. So there is still more work to do. This is, I would say, a mostly complete effort now. It's still not highly tuned, and I could really use some help with the tuning to streamline the whole experience for newcomers. So is documentation done? No, it's never done. None of this stuff will ever be done. It's in a better shape than it was. I hope everybody sees that this is a living thing. It needs to continue to be a living thing. It's not like we can do a fix-it for a weekend and then it's finished. It'll never be finished. It's more like a first draft, what we've got now, and it should never be done. Okay, so anybody recognize the picture up here? It's the doctors, yes. I put in, this is like a pledge drive. It's like a campaign to get people involved. And I put in pledge drive, and for some reason that picture came up, and I just thought that's too perfect. It's the first 5 Doctor Who's. Anyway, so do you want to help? Good. Because you can help us meet our target, just like NPR or whatever. I'm taking pledges right now. Okay, so I've told you that there are people to prevent you leaving now that you're here, but basically I can sum up the rest of this talk in this one slide, which is hopefully with the understanding that it's not yet complete and probably needs, probably there's still some things missing, a couple of mistakes in there, that sort of thing. Hopefully everything you need to know as a contributor is now organized for you under scalalang.org/contribute. Okay, and I can show you that right now. So let's take a look. Basically the rest of this is going to be a quick guide to the contributor documentation and the contributor resources, followed by effectively a bit more, please come and help. And then if there's time, and I think there will be, A bit of a discussion at the end, Q&A, and brainstorming as well. If you guys have ideas, this is a perfect opportunity to get them out, and I'll actually be taking notes as we go. So this is the new contribute page. It went up yesterday. Funny story about this. I learned a couple of things yesterday, so this is already incomplete. I had these pages ready to go. They'd been sitting in a pull request for about a week or so. I'd run this multiple times. I'd clicked on all the links, checked everything out. I was really careful. And so I pushed it up to the site yesterday, and the site broke. And I spent 2 hours trying to fix it. And it turns out that the site runs some different configuration parameters on the engine than my laptop does. And it didn't work. The links didn't work. I broke a page. There was a bunch of stuff. Those things need to go back into the documentation so that you guys don't make that mistake. And I'm also going to try and get the parameters in sync so that this doesn't happen again. It was fairly alarming. And it meant that I was doing my slides today when I was trying to do them yesterday afternoon. So, okay. So contribute. You get here. The very simplest thing you can do is to report bugs, if you know about them. Now there are some, I'll go into each of these in turn, but each of these is not as simple as it sounds. Okay, reporting a bug is not just a case of reporting a bug. There are some things to do before you do that, because we want to try and not get duplicates in the system, stuff like that. We want nice clear bug reports that make it easy for somebody to pick up and run with. That sort of thing. But then for actual contribution, there's documentation, bug fixes, core libraries, IDE and build tools, and compiler and language. And if you want to jump straight in, if you've read all of this stuff or you know it all already, it was a bit like a few years ago I heard a story in England about a Christmas village that had been set up called Lapland. And people were paying £30 to get in, and when they got in, it was a muddy field with a few tents. And there was hundreds or thousands of complaints. And it felt a little bit like this when I kind of hit this stuff. It was like, we want you to come to contribute to us, and then you sort of got in, and it was this sort of slightly untidy, sort of non-welcoming experience. And one of the worst things was, there was a bug list in there, and it was kind of a static order of the bug list. The first page, all of the good bugs had been taken, and so all of the really crappy bugs that nobody wanted to fit or fix had risen to the top, and the first thing you saw was this page of bugs that nobody in their right mind would want to touch. And it was, you know, Google does all these kind of studies about the first page results are critical. Most people don't get beyond the second page of search results. And what we were doing was with this was sort of saying, you know, here's some stuff that you really don't want to fix. And it wasn't a welcoming experience. So the community tickets now are ordered, and it's certainly not perfect yet, this part either, but they are actually ordered by votes. Unfortunately, people don't vote as much either, which is also something you can do no matter what your level. If you're affected by a bug, see if you can find it in there and go and vote it up so it goes up in the ranking. People see it earlier. But they're actually now categorized by the different things. So if you want to work on documentation, here's the issues for documentation: core libraries, tools, compiler. And if you're the master of all things and you just want some work to do, there's all issues. You can take a look at the whole darn lot and choose something from there. Okay, so that is the contributor page. You basically choose your journey now. What do I want to do? I want to help with documentation. Follow the documentation link. You get the idea. Okay, so how can you help? So Scala Lang Contribute is the place to go. Another way you can help, and there's many ways that this can go. So the whole idea of this is to get more contributors. I wanted to start beating the drum long ago, but the problem is, if we had done that, everybody would have got here and would have been like, what do we do? There's not much information here on how I can actually help. So it was necessary to do this part first. Now that it's done, there's basically a few things that can happen. It could be that nobody still wants to contribute anymore, in which case I'll be rather sad, and you'll all be responsible for having ruined my day. Or it could get a nice influx of volunteers, and we get a lot more effort and energy put into the Scala. Or we should be so lucky, it could turn into some runaway success where suddenly the floodgates open and everybody starts sending stuff in. Now, if that happens, there's going to be a lot of pull requests that people don't get to for a period of time, so be patient with us. Okay, there's a lot of changes going on right now, and there's not that many resources to handle it. So best efforts are going to be made to keep up with it. Hopefully there's enough demand. Like I said, it would be great to have this problem, but it also could be a sucky experience for a while we kind of figure out how to deal with a large surge of changes, if there is one. Okay, and then the other thing that's obviously going to change, although nobody quite knows when, but it's starting to be discussed, is I've heard it since I got involved with Scala contributor effort, is that people are staying away from contributing. They really are staying away from contributing to Scala right now because they don't want to use Jira. I've heard it time and again. It's not a fluke. People actually say to me, I'm not going to do this, I don't want to go near Jira. So it is clear that we need to make a change there. There aren't any good answers to this. It's something that Adrian Moores in particular has been trying to do for a long time. He's got some tools. The tools are not perfect. There's no fully automated solution that will work exactly right. So over time, this is, I think, pretty much going to happen. It's going to be a bit of a woolly process. There may be a sort of declaration of bankruptcy at some point or something like that. Regardless, there's going to be more changes to the documents at that time as well, because they all refer to Jira right now. And so definitely far from a done thing. Let me go back to present mode here. There we go. Right. Logistics. And this is actually slightly out of date, this slide I've just realized. Primarily, Scala internals is still going to be the place that some of this coordination takes place. And because, if it starts to become a runaway success, there's going to be a lot of postings on there. It's been suggested that in the titles, we actually start classifying the kind of field or the area that you're wanting to or contributing to with square brackets around something like docs, issue, tools, libs, so that it helps us filter, different teams filter out what's going on. Now, I say this is out of date because actually since I wrote this slide, something really quite profound has happened, which is, who's using Gitter here now? The Git IM service, instant messaging service. That's pretty amazing, and it's pretty hard to ignore that as a coordination tool for this kind of thing. So, haven't decided what to do yet. I'll come back to that at the end. That's part of the discussion thing, but I have some ideas on that. Another big one is I've put a lot of effort, and other people have put a lot of effort before me into providing resources that answer a lot of the questions. And it will be smoother for everybody, yourselves included, if before you try and contribute some documentation, you read about contributing documentation. We are not going to say you can't do it otherwise because you're volunteers, but like I said, it'll be just a more pleasurable experience for everybody involved if you can read about it first. And if they are too long and you find them hard to read, then we also accept improvements to the documentation. Hint, hint. So, much of this is still being sorted out, so we'll discuss ways of doing this. But for now, there's actually one more thing that I will be mentioning again at the end. Scala internals will be a place to coordinate and discuss all this stuff, and we'll talk about other channels of communication there. There is also, again, show of hands, how many people knew that scalalang.org has a blog on it? One person. Shadaj. Oh, and Laura, of course, knew. That's because there's only one article that's ever been published on there. That's going to change. Start looking at scalalang.org blog, and we will start updating, making updates there. And that is, it's going to take a while to establish it, get it really rolling. But we're going to try and make that a developer-centric blog for all things in the Scala space. So, for example, the problem that we had with the non-delivery of the Scala compiler from Maven Central. That was something that was known about, but it wasn't really blogged about at the time because it was, until that happened, nobody thought it was very important. Like, nobody actually predicted this was ever going to happen. It was just one of those kind of weird delivery things that a game I get distracted, but a game module for Minecraft was actually downloading that version of Scala and was causing a tremendous amount of traffic from Maven Central, or was responsible for a tremendous amount of the traffic from Maven Central, and they reconfigured some stuff to try and handle the load, and it went wrong, and that's what stopped the delivery. That would have been the sort of thing that we would definitely mention on a developer-facing blog. Hey, did you know, blah, 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 the Maven thing, yeah, whatever, you get the idea. Okay, something else that's new is, and I think really starting to catch on and show some real value, is activator templates. Now, activator is not necessarily part of the Scala space, it's a Typesafe tool, but it has become a really good place for people to publish executable code examples with tutorials that go with them. And I've done a few of them, and I look now for activator templates for a new library ahead of something. The really nice thing about this is most of the contributions that we're asking for are very much part of the Scala domain, Scala core libraries, Scala language. Activator templates can be any library that you're interested in. If you've got your own library, or you just want to show how RX Scala works, an activator template is a great way to do that. And there's very little in the way of kind of hoops to jump through to do one of those. So this really is the lowest barrier to entry. If you want a simple way to have an impact and put some code out there, it's a good way to do it. It's perfect for coding examples. And if anybody's interested, this is one of the tools that maybe you might be worth, or might want to look into. Right now you have to write the tutorial in HTML, and it's a bit clunky. I'd love it if somebody was to contribute a markdown authoring part of that. I've got it on my list to do, but I'm not sure when I'll get to it. Okay. Report bugs. These are some of the propaganda posters that are actually from a Star Wars site, so it's Star Wars propaganda. I thought you'd like that. Report bugs. Jira is the way to do it for all of the core Scala stuff for now, unless it's one of the other projects, like SBT, for example, uses GitHub issues. All of that's clear from the various tools pages and stuff like that. But there is a right way to do it, and this is, I think, really, really crucial. So let's have a look at some of these. Let's work through them. Right, bug reporting. Number one, is it actually a bug? Just because it doesn't work the way you think doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bug. There are some things to go through, and then you want to look at the categories. Library, is it a library compiler, reflection bug? Scala Doc bugs are also a problem that may be needed to do. Things that don't go into the Jira are anything to do with Arca, Play, Slick, Actors Migration Kit, the Scala IDE, or SBT. They have their own bug tracking databases, so that's another thing. And then I think this is the golden rule. Okay, reporting confirmed bugs is a sin. Okay, you will meet your eternal damnation that way. No, it's to try and keep the duplicates down. Okay, the best thing to do is, if you find a bug, go and search for it, see if you can find it in there, and if you do, vote it up. That's a great alternative. It saves you time too. Say, this affects me. So that's bug fixing. So like I said, there is a correct way to do it. This document will describe it. I think it makes it pretty easy. Tells you the kind of titles to use and stuff like that. How you tell the version that it's happening on. All the stuff you need. So that's good. All right, that's bugs. Okay, Scala Doc. And when I said anyone in this room, no matter whether they've never seen Scala before, can help, this is what I'm talking about. One of the lowest hanging pieces of fruit is helping us to find classes in Scala Doc that are not documented. There are plenty of them. Here is a great example. Let me bring up Scala Doc quick. So, Scala Doc. There we go. API docs and future. Okay, there's a little bit on that. The companion object, nothing at all. Now this would be a great opportunity to talk about methods like sequence and stuff like that. Really, really useful methods that are on the companion object, and they're not covered anywhere. So this is low-hanging fruit right here. I left this for somebody as a way to prime the pump. I actually almost wrote this, and I'm like, no, somebody else should do it. They'll be infected with the pleasure of seeing it. But I did do the package object for it, which now has things like the standard imports that you normally use when you're working with concurrency with Scala futures and Scala actors. This wasn't here before, and in particular, the implicit's global. I always forget what that one is. I have to wait for the compiler to tell me the path again, because I am very forgetful and those things slip my mind easily. So package objects are a great place to put overviews for these APIs, and most of them are missing stuff. So this is like I say, low-hanging fruit. Number one, just find the places where it's missing. Number two, if you feel like it, donate something. It'll make you feel really good. Okay. A couple of things that I will talk about on this one is spell check it and grammar check it and code check it. Okay, we're actually working on a way that the code snippets that's in those will actually be compiled for correctness, but it's not ready yet. So for now, check it out in the REPL first, make sure it actually works. Okay. Help us find the missing doc, good. Docs.scalalang.org, I'm going to rush through these a bit because I want to get to the other ones. Docs.scalalang.org is for overviews, tutorials, stuff like that. It's written in Markdown and it uses Jekyll as the engine to create it. So if you want to contribute to that, please do. There's, again, lots of rules. There's things that you have to consider are the fit and feel of the stuff that you're writing and whether there's material there already. We don't want duplicates in that either. But there's plenty of room there. If anybody knows Python and Scala, I'm going to put one out there right now that's a kind of a personal one. I'd love to write it. I'm not sure I've got the time. But right now there are lots of scientists and mathematicians using Spark. And because they're scientists and mathematicians, they're using Spark with Python. And then they go to a Spark user group and they find out that Scala works with Spark as well, and it's much faster. And then they want to learn Scala because they can still use Spark and they can get the extra power. A conversion, there is a tutorial in there, but it's empty right now, for going from Python to Scala. If somebody wanted to donate that, that would be a tremendous resource, especially if it was done with Spark in mind. That would be a great way to get people into Scala. Invite them in. The first one's free. Okay, so along this line, now with these documents, you're starting to get more pain. Okay, there is a certain amount of pain. The thing about this is I'm a really cheeky so-and-so. Not only do I ask you to do stuff, we're going to ask you to do it well. And we're going to send it back if it's not done well. So expect some revisions on this. It will actually get editing. The advantage of this is you'll probably become a better writer out of it because somebody else is looking at your stuff. I became a much better writer when I wrote my master's thesis because I had a real stickler of a professor who wouldn't let anything through. And he made me learn to write correctly and use language correctly. It was great. Guides, overviews, and tutorials go in there. You could also update the wiki. Sorry, it's under the picture. You could, actually, you know what? Don't do that anymore. The wiki's dead. Okay, if you use the wiki at all, use it to raid for information, bring it across to the other sites. I'm not sure what we're going to do long term, but don't put any more effort into updating the wiki at this point. Just use it as a resource. I think that's fair to say. Okay, right. Scalalang.org, this is the big granddaddy. This is the one that you hit. Okay, docs is where all the tutorials go. This one is the one I broke yesterday. I was a bit concerned for about an hour trying to get it back up again and all happy. But this is where the process itself is documented. This is where most of my changes have gone. Only those with a high pain threshold need apply for this position. It really is, it's the point that people hit when they come into the Scala community. We want to make sure it's really nice. And we want to keep it looking good. No broken links, no spelling mistakes. Grammar should be good. The editing should be on point. Everything's going to be good. So contributions for this are extremely welcome. They're likely to be extremely difficult to get through. You now have your expectations set. Okay, bug fixes. This was already well documented. It was extremely well documented. The problem was it fell of the TLDR rule. Too long didn't read. Because there's this hacker guide that kind of guided you through the whole thing. It was fantastically detailed. And the first time I read it, I had to read it like 3 times, and it took me all day to really kind of absorb it. So what I did for that, that I think you're going to like, I hope you're going to like, is let's just go to contribute. Let's show you what it's like. So contribute, bug fixes. And then this is an old pilot trick. Pilots have checklists for everything. If you ever learn to become a pilot, they have a checklist for when your plane is on fire. Okay, I think it's largely so that you don't just run around screaming or you know, in panic, scream and then die in the plane. It actually gives you something to do, but it might work. So they checklist everything. This is a checklist for fixing a bug, and this is the minimal version of it. It's the summary, and it's deep linked into the hacker guide and all the other resources that I had to pull together. Submitting a bug the first time, it took me about a week to get it right, and it was a really small bug. But just getting all the pieces lined up was really hard. And I was sitting, I don't know if Adrian's here, but I got to say thank you to him. I was sitting opposite Adrian Moore's, and I kept like making him take his headphones off to ask him yet another question about how this should be done. And I was writing everything down and putting it all down in his, so that you've now got a checklist, and if any of these steps are unfamiliar, you can click through to them and read them. So I actually use this all the time now because I'm also very forgetful, and it's a great way of me remembering how to do this. So the bug fixes, they were well documented, but they weren't efficiently documented. They are now kind of, you know, summarized and streamlined, and you can dig in where you need more details. Tools and IDEs, there was nothing here at all. Okay, we just completely ignored the IDE space. SBT, I think most people would agree, is pretty important, as are things like partest and debuild for people who are working on bug fixes, things like that. So we only really are interested in the core Scala tools and IDEs here. This is not a, you know, bring your tool to the party thing. This is the ones that arbitrarily we deem as really important to the Scala developers out there. There's probably omissions, there's maybe things that don't need to be in there. You can contribute, okay? Now this is not, I will say at this point, putting your own tool on there in the hope that it gets coverage, that's going to be a change that probably gets rejected, I'm sorry to say. This is not an advertising thing. But if I did miss something, then we can have that discussion. So here are the tools, let's go for those. Contribute to tools. IDEs and build tools. And this is what's up there right now. SBT, Scala Doc, of course, Scala IDE, debuild, partest, enzyme, discoverage, and abide. And these are sort of in order of importance. The last ones you may not have heard of, but they have a lot of potential. Abide in particular, I'm quite excited about. It gives you an ability to sort of do static analysis and catch more errors. Scala P and Scalariform, these are under the ICU section of the site, as I'm calling it. It's intensive care. These really need some love. Look at Scalariform, it doesn't even have an icon. Okay? How many people here use Scalariform? Okay, it doesn't have an icon, and it hasn't had an update in since November of last year, and that's the fork that was created because the other one wasn't moving. It's on life support, man. We got to get some people on that. So that's tools, IDEs. Right, now for the big one. Tools, IDEs, and then the core libraries. So this is the really big ones. And I love this. Loose slips bring down starships. When I started talking about slips, Paul Phillips said to me, loose ships sink slips. And I didn't get it at first, but I thought that was quite funny after I thought about it for a bit. So this is also all new. We've got a mechanism for this now. It's probably not perfect. I mean, in fact, it's certainly not perfect yet, but we actually have a mechanism. We didn't have that before. As far as everybody was concerned, we weren't looking for contributions for core libraries. That was kind of the message people got because there was nothing there, right? You don't see anything there, you're like, oh, not interested in that. So it's called SLIP. It's like a SIP, but it's a Scala library improvement process. And everything you need to know, again, is under contribute, under core libs. And the the SIPs themselves, the SIPs and the slips live alongside one another. Slips have actually been moved up in importance above SIPs right now. People inside of the Scala community are more interested in getting some movement on the libraries again than certainly in adding more features to the Scala language. That's another conversation that I'll save for another time. It's a lengthy one. But, okay. So, I want to move on to the bit where everybody gets to say stuff and yell at me. But what's in it for you? Right. At the moment, surprisingly little. Other than the feeling of having done a really good job. Okay, now we're working on some stuff. We're going to have stickers at some point. My good friend Richard Summerhays is going to design some stickers, and they will be for contributors. We'll actually keep a track of who has contributed what, and you'll have like grades yet to be decided, and you'll get like bronze, silver, and gold levels, and you'll be able to stick them on your laptop and brag about how much you've contributed to the common good. So that's going to be one of them. Another one is we're going to bring back the leaderboard. This is actually a sad story. We just killed the old leaderboard. It's actually gone now because it was updated so rarely and it was almost always inaccurate. We decided it was better not to have anything than to have something that was sort of not really accurate at all and not representative. But we're going to bring it back. We're going to have a much nicer way of looking at it. In the meantime, to fill in the gap, Adrian, Greg, Lucas, and Jason, the compiler team, have said that they will call out contributions, good contributions, and sort of give respect and kudos in the meantime to sort of help fill the gap and make people feel good about what they're doing. So that's part of it. The other things that are more tangible that you'll get out of it, you'll be working with guys like this who know the compiler inside and out. There's no way you're not going to learn stuff by doing that. Whether you're, even if it's the documentation, you're going to learn stuff about the libraries as you do it. Fixing bugs, you're going to learn stuff. Working on tools, you're going to learn stuff. It's a great way to learn stuff. It's fantastic. I mean, think of the value of actually getting some advice and time from these guys just by contributing some of your time. I think that's a pretty damn good exchange rate, personally. I'm not promising a lot of their time. I know they're busy, but okay. There is so much left to do, it's not funny, but the beginnings are there now, and I need help with the rest of it. I can't, apart from anything else, I can't run at this pace much longer. There's just too much, and it's sort of crushingly depressing to think about all the work that needs to be done. So SIPs are obviously long overdue for an overhaul. The SIPs and slips as they are right now, I'm not really a designer, but even I can tell it's a pretty grotty looking part of the website. It's not very pleasing, it's not very aesthetic, it's not going to scale well when we get a lot of slips and SIPs in there. So we're going to try and figure out a new home for them to live in. But don't let it stop you doing things right now. My philosophy is very much do something now, no matter what it is, and do something better later, rather than just waiting to always do something better because it never happens. So slip meetings and channels, we're trying to get this set up right now, but I mentioned Gitter. It's likely that a lot of coordination is going to happen on Gitter. We'll announce that soon. We're going to instigate and continue to regularly have monthly slip meetings. And we're actually going to have slips that die now. So the old SIPs, some of them are sort of just abandoned, but it's never been said that they've been abandoned. People go to the site and they're not really sure what's happening with this one, that sort of thing. We are actually going to start moving things into dormant states if nothing happens on them for a while. And that will be part of the job of the slip committee when they meet, is has anything happened on this in the last 3 months? If that's how long we decide it is. Nope, it's being moved to dormant. The owners of it are going to get an email that says your slip has been moved to dormancy until you do something else with it. This is not a threat, it's just the way it is. We want to keep this thing alive and keep people informed of what's going on. And we're going to resurrect the Scala blog. This one I'm excited about. Now this will probably, I don't know if we're going to keep going. Like I said, small moves, get something working now, do the right thing later. Right now the Scala blog, when you make put a new article on there, it means actually submitting a pull request and updating the site and all that sort of thing. It sounds a little heavy to me. I think we might investigate whether we can do something a bit more reactive blog-ish long term. But for now, just get used to it. The RSS feeds will still work. Whatever you subscribe to with your RSS reader, it'll transfer to the new one, so subscribe to it. And then Jira to GitHub, it's an unknown, but we've had a couple of nibbles already. I think this is something that we're probably going to need some help with when it happens. Unknown what the mechanism will be. There's a lot to discuss about it, but obviously it is a problem for people. They don't want to use Jira. And part of being a community is you go where the community is. You don't expect them to come meet you all the time. You have to go where they are. And the community is in GitHub these days. We're well aware of that. Okay, so the Q&A, questions and comments, and brainstorming from you guys. How long have we got? Oh gosh, 5 minutes I think. I did talk a long time. But if you've got anything you want to ask, or any ideas that you've got, there were a couple of, one of the other things that isn't on the slides, but will also be something that we ask you to do, is if you have a Scala project and it's not part of the community build right now, there's no instructions yet, but there will be instructions for how you can add your project to the community build. For those of you who don't know what that is, whenever a new version or a change to Scala comes out, there's a big old grid of engines, a big old grid of computers, and they run that new version of the Scala compiler on how many, hundreds or thousands at this point of community projects? 1.5 million lines of code, right. So it compiles and runs the tests on 1.5 million lines of code of Scala to look for problems, to look for compatibility issues. The more projects computer time is cheap these days. Well, relatively so. The more community projects we get in there, the less likely we are to have breaking changes. So there will be a way for you to add your project to that list, to that effort. Okay, so any questions? Anything you want to say? Thank you all for volunteering. I expect all of the contributions on my desk on Monday morning. All right, thanks. Anything? No, everybody's just desperate to get away now. They weren't expecting that level of pressure. Ah, yes. Hello.
Hi. You mentioned voting on issues. Is there some way to have visibility into the voting? Because it's very motivating. If I know there's an issue that might help 3 people, I might spend a couple hours on it.
Oh, right. So the question, I don't have to repeat the question because it was on the microphones. I'm so used to doing that now. Yes, the Jira issues themselves, the Jira pages do have votes, and they are sorted now. Those links that I brought up that list the issues, they're sorted in descending order by votes. The problem is, not many people vote, so there's like one issue with like 9 votes, and then about 3 with 7, and then a whole bunch with 2, and then like all of the rest of them have like 1 vote in the system, or 0 votes, or whatever the default is. So actually voting on them, if you can bear, you say, I'm not really a Jira hater, I have to say. I don't really like Jira, but then I don't really like any bug tracking software, just like I don't really like any building software. It's just a tool that usually gets in my way. But you can vote in Jira, so if you can bring yourself to actually go to Jira, then you can vote there and you can help influence those bugs and how they get seen. But they are actually organized by descending order. Now when we go to GitHub, at the moment there's no voting kind of system in GitHub, so that's going to be something we actually lose unless GitHub implements it in the meantime. I got no good answer for you on that one. People want to go to GitHub, we'll move to GitHub. We might lose voting for a while. I don't know what else we can do for that. Comments, yeah, comments with +1 I think is the only way to do it right now, which is a bit lame, but it works. Hugh.
Loop would there be?
For contributors, what kind of feedback loop? Right. All of this is on the site, but I'll summarize. No matter which way you contribute, it's going to end up in a pull request in GitHub at some point. That's really where the conversation sort of carries on. Before that, Scala internals is a good place to discuss stuff. If you're like, it's not a bad idea to get onto Scala internals and say, hey, I'm thinking of like doing a bunch of documentation around futures. If only, to use another pilot analogy, to sort of be a unicom. When you come into land at a small airport where there's no tower, as a pilot, you kind of just announce on the radio that you're going to do something, whether there's anyone in the area or not, because you don't want to have a crash landing with somebody else. And it would sort of be like that. So you'd sort of say, I want to work on future documentation. It may be that nobody even notices, but if anybody else is doing that same thing at the same time, at least you remove that duplication and you let people know it's coming. After that, the GitHub will be where most of the peer reviewing takes place, even for Scala Doc, Scala Lang, and docs.scala-lang. All the editing, all the reviews and stuff will take place in a GitHub pull request. So, yes?
Yeah. It's just a comment.
Okay.
Yeah. I came from Japan, but most of Japanese don't read English document.
That should have been on there.
Yeah, so I think the translation is an important task for Japanese community.
That would be fantastic. In fact, yes, internationalization and localization efforts is absolutely something we want to do. Now for that, there's going to be a lot of that. An enterprising gentleman such as yourself may decide at some point to volunteer to actually lead the Japanese translation effort, which would be fantastic if you wanted to do that. You may have noticed by this stage that I really have no problem in asking for people for far more than they actually intended to give. But yes, it can be dangerous to sort of ask a question like that to me. But yeah, that would be great. If you wanted to sort of spearhead an effort to do that, that would be fantastic. And we give you lots of support. And, you know, send you stickers and stuff like that.
Thank you very much.
So, okay. Okay, I guess that's it. Thank you very much for coming.